Newsweek, truly remarkable. What weird fun Infinite Jest is to read. The New York Times, uproarious. It shows off Wallace as one of the big talents of his generation, a writer of virtuistic talents who can seemingly do anything. That's the way I feel about you. I mean, I'm a little bit, I hear a brain at work there. Sort of, where do you want it to go? What is it?
I think not exploding.
In late childhood, I learned how to play tennis on the blacktop courts of a small public park carved from farmland that had been nitrogenized too often to farm anymore.
There's this sort of pride that here's this cult writer, and he's from the Midwest, and he wears bandanas.
This is where David Foster Wallace was from. This was like the town that he wrote parts of Infinite Jest in.
It occurs to Gately that he's never had any sort of dream where somebody says anything like vast bulk, much less agora, which Gately interprets as a kind of expensive sweater.
I mean, I'm now on page 981 of Infinite Jest, and the footnotes run, notes and errata run to page.
Why is this book held up so highly? Like, why does it have so much cultural currency?
He's doing two things all the time, hyper-intellectualizing, but then also making it accessible. And there's something about the energy with which he does that I think speaks to especially young men, especially young straight men, especially young straight white men.
I believe with Hegel that transcendence is absorption. I could interface you guys right under the table, I say. I first read Infinite Jest when I was in college, and I was basically reborn, pretty much, and wanted to read everything he'd written, and yeah, my fandom is yeah, as hardcore as just about everybody else at the conference, probably.
If you go around saying you're a David Foster Wallace nerd, everyone thinks that you're like, I don't know, really pseudo-intellectualist, and you're going to interact with the literary community in a way that might be a little condescending.
Feminists are always saying this. So feminists are saying white males have, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this enormous book and impose my phallus on the consciousness of the world.
And you say?
If that was going on, it was going on at a level of awareness I do not want to have access to.
I have this kind of theory that as soon as the internet was invented, one of the first books that was discussed online was Gravity's Rainbow. And it makes sense because it appeals to a lot of the scientists and kind of engineers who were coding and writing the first DARPANET. Really smart readers wanted something else like that. They were kind of like chasing this high of what is the next big encyclopedic novel. So in 1996, when Infinite Jest came out, it was on people's radar, and the Wallace listserv started in April of 1996, but it existed at a time where social media did not. And in fact, finding out about David Foster Wallace on the internet was very hard to do.
I wanted to thank you all for coming again. This conference is one of the most fun things I do all year. As the chair of the David Foster Wallace Conference, it's somewhat ironic. I have not yet read Infinite Jest.
Show of hands, how many people have read the entire book? Wonderful. It is the most difficult book I have ever narrated. All the French sounds slightly different because I had to go back and redo all the French. Because I don't speak French, I can read it phonetically, but I don't understand what it means. And let me tell you, the difference between de, du, and don is really important.
I live in New York. You walk around, Washington Square Park where NYU is situated, and you read Infinite Jest there, and someone's going to come up to you and ask you, like, how far have you gotten? Like, oh, I made it to this page, And I think there's definitely like a split there between people who want to view it really academically and people who really don't want it to be an academic thing. People who want it to be just like, this is this big book that I'm reading, and people who are like, yeah, but what does this mean?
Is Wallace's very writing a structural reflection of and on toxic or hegemonic, at the very least, masculinity?
This is a body of work that we all have interest in for a variety of reasons. There's sort of a big tent kind of vibe to it.
The Cult of St. Dave. People who read it and it's just like the best shit ever written ever, and you can't talk bad about it or whatever. There are no problems with it. But then there are also folks who are resistant or refuse to read Wallace.
I had this idea where I was like, well, what if I read it? What if I actually read it? Like, what if I become somebody who's actually read this book and also manages to hate it? Is that possible? No, it's not. Like, it's not. I can hate parts of it, and I do, but it's too long to actually hate the entire thing. You would die.
For most of the year, I don't really think about the fact that Wallace worked here. I think many of our attendees see that as a very meaningful portion of the conference.
He didn't live a life that was exclusive to Central Illinois, right? But he is forever indelibly associated here, and that's, I think, why it makes sense to have a conference like the David Foster Wallace conference here, because you get some sense of the world that he saw it in this sort of most fertile period of his career.
It's when he comes back for the Illinois State Fair, he talks about the flatness of the ground, but then the gentle sort of sine wave of the roadways, and how, you have to sort of be from here in a sense to feel that.
Every time he describes Illinois, completely spot on. I don't know what there is to do in the places I was flying over.
Wallace describes it as a kind of an ocean, and he's absolutely right, and his way of capturing the corn and the fields and the landscape is amazing.
Ale-colored sunshine and pale sky and whorls of cirrus, so high they cast no shadow. Insects, all business, all the time.
Quartz and chert and schist and chondrite iron scabs and granite. Very old land. Look around you. The horizon, trembling, shapeless. We are all of us brothers.
We are glad to be the home of Illinois State University and State Farm Insurance, and both of them are destination drivers for us. David Foster Wallace actually wrote the bulk of his Infinite Justice here, and so we have hundreds of people coming in every year for that. So this is the map that we've developed. You can go to all of these places and visit and stop and see them probably within an hour or so.
It's absolutely amazing. It's really interesting being here in Normal, actually experiencing the normal American town. Because as a foreigner, you usually go on holidays to New York, to Washington, to Los Angeles. That's not the country. In some way, it is. It is quite normal here. And experiencing that normality gains you a different kind of understanding of how, I wouldn't say real, but regular America.
I worked on many committees with him, and I don't think he was wasted. I think David felt safe here. He did everything not to leave. I don't know if you know that. I mean, they coaxed him with money, they coaxed him with more money, they coaxed him with course loads. Finally, he said, my dog can't travel. And they brought somebody to bring his dog from here to California. I mean, he was happy here, as happy as David could be. I think there are things about David that everybody knows, and I think he went to meetings and he coped with the problems he had. He was not on drugs here, and he had his moods. He secluded himself. Often it was just for writing. He was unavailable when he was in those periods where he just wanted to write.
There are these concerns about the validity of even studying Wallace. And I find those concerns somewhat invalid because the writing is separate from the person. But a whole collection of contemporary authors, there's a lot of good writing out today. And one of the issues with Wallace having the brand problem, so to speak, is that for those who have not read his work, many have decided that they will not read it. And I do worry that if I put on my if I'm applying for a job position and I know that I run the David Foster Wallace conference, I do worry that people will come to the mistaken assumption that I somehow condone the behaviors, which I don't.
Mary Carr coming out and saying, like, I have a Me Too story as well, and it was already published in a book, but nobody paid attention to it because we haven't thought critically about Wallace in this way. People got really defensive about that. And I think it's hard with Wallace because he is no longer with us, which means that we're more likely to romanticize him and to say that him sending, thinking about killing this woman's husband, who he was stalking, like, we're more likely to romanticize that, unfortunately. And I have seen some defensiveness surrounding that, which is really unfortunate.
There's so much of his drafts and letters and emails just available for public consumption. So in life, he was a very, very private person, but in death, a lot of his private stuff has become public. So figuring out who he was behind the scenes, and he's not here to explain it, and everybody's sort of making assumptions or presumptions or assertions or whatever we want to call them. And I think that's something we have to remember, is that he was a person. He had flaws, he had problems, and not to try to explain them away or anything like that.
At its best moments, Infinite Jest is like scarily prescient. And at its worst moments, it just seems to like reify some of that cultural tone deafness that we seem to be unable to shake as a society. I am just concerned about where this book and the culture surrounding it fits in with our current present day culture. It's kind of led me to ask the question, like, has Infinite Jest somewhat outlived its usefulness in our culture? Like, are there other works that attempt similar things that maybe don't alienate as many people as quickly? That's kind of what our project is all about, kind of like talking through these moments where it's like there is genius there, but is it failing? Could it be better? Could we ask for more from our genius in this Wallace? So.
On the one hand, it's like, yeah, sure, product of his time, and you have to read the context with it. And we got to call out the shit that is either lacking and missing or is done poorly, like Infinite Jest and the Wardine passages, where he's adopting the voice of an African-American person and doing it very poorly. Why is that in there? Does it need to be in there? It is in there, like it made the cut. What does it do or not do? And it's a huge problem that needs to be addressed, right?
We can't pretend that we're reading it in a vacuum. Like, there is a lot going on in our political and cultural climate right now that is mirrored in the book. And without saying, okay, let's take a step back and like kind of analyze whether or not this book has a place in 2018 in the world that we live in, I don't think we're doing ourselves any justice, and I don't think we're doing the work any justice either. So,
the majority of the academic community is usually of an upper-ish class, mostly white male. Like, there's a lot of women getting involved in the community now, and that's, I think, why the misogyny and the woman problems are being talked about a little bit. I don't know that there's much to be said critically about the race issues in Infinite Jest, and I might be totally wrong about that. I just haven't figured it out yet. Like, he says shitty things about race. He isn't good at writing from the perspective of different races, but where does it go from there?
Right. Yeah, and my worry is that, okay, say we have a panel and there's a really academic good paper that addresses heteronormativity and race and critical issues. No one is going to read that, compared to how many people will retweet something that's like, Dave Foster Wallace was an abusive asshole, retweet 20,000 times. Well, whereas we've dealt with it in an academic setting with this one thing. It's like, no one's going to start reading him if the conception is that guy was a rapist and an asshole, and he's Harvey Weinstein. It's like, people aren't going to come to the books if the popular perception is he's Harvey Weinstein.
I think we as a community have to say, we have to have an official word, at least that we've kind of reckoned with the fact that he mistreated women. Doesn't make him Harvey Weinstein, but that's a thing that's recognized, and that we can move on to more interesting stuff, in my opinion. Like the misogynies in the writing, and how we engage with Infinite Jest as a historical document that's a product of the 90s and the sort of larger cultural misogynies.
Yeah.